Good morning. I'm Professor Einstein, and this is Media Studies 281. This semester, it's called Cults versus Marketing. I'm going to teach this class kind of old style. I mean, new style because you're seeing me this way, but old style in that I'm not putting anything up on the internet other than the syllabus. You can find that on my website under the blog. I will post each session week by week, so you will see it grow over the course of the semester. This class is an investigation into the overlap between marketing and cult recruitment and retention techniques. And it is based on my book, Hoodwinked: How Marketers Use the Same Tactics as Cults. So we will use Hoodwinked as the basis for the course, but then we'll dig into some of the background information that makes up this content. While this book took me about 3 years to write, it's really based on 30 years of my work researching the overlap between religion and marketing. Today I want to give you a little bit of a roadmap for the course and also tell you the content that we're going to be using. Most of it you'll be able to find online. Some of it you will not be able to, and where you will not be able to, you're still going to be okay. But I'm going to tell you what the books and the content that we're using so that if you decide you want to go out and get it, you can. So in addition to Hoodwinked, we're going to be using a couple of chapters from this book called Selling the Sacred, Religion and Marketing from CrossFit to QAnon. For the purposes of this course, we're only using 2 of the chapters in the book. One is about CrossFit as a cult, and another about multi-level marketing. Another book I'm using, which is kind of fun if you're interested in religion, is called Religion in 5 Minutes. These are very short pieces, and I have students read them in class so we can then discuss these concepts. I'm not a religious studies scholar, and this is not a class about religion. It is about understanding what religions do from a sociological perspective, and we pull that out to talk about it in relationship to cults. One of the key things that religion does is create community. Cults create community. Marketers want to create community. And if we think about this in terms of something like social media spaces want to create community. So one of the reasons why I can talk about cults in relationship to marketing now is that brands have taken on this fervor in terms of wanting to connect us to brands because of digital technology. And this is an important idea that we're going to come back to over and over and over again throughout the course of the semester. One of the exercises I did in class today is to ask my students to list as many cults as they possibly can, just to write them down. So why don't you pause for just a second and just off the top of your head, write down as many cults as you can think of. Go ahead and pause this. So what cults did you come up with? If you're of a certain age, you probably mentioned something like Jonestown, or the Branch Davidians at Waco, or maybe Heaven's Gate, or Charles Manson. What I was really surprised to see in my class that my students didn't mention any of those. And this is a really important thing. It was an important learning thing for me. I think it's also really important for those of us of an older generation who lived through those cults to understand that students today don't think about cults that way. This is part of the reason why I'm spending several classes at the beginning of the semester presenting things like Jonestown to them. What we did in the first class was look at a documentary from CNN called Escape from Jonestown. And I had to skip through parts of it because if you watch it, and there's a link to it in the syllabus, it is very disturbing if you haven't seen it before. Those of us who lived through that time and were aware of it, and it's disturbing for us, right? Knowing that 900 plus people died because they drank Flavor Aid, right? But this is where the term drank the Kool-Aid came from, was Jonestown. Was Jim Jones told 909 people to drink the Kool-Aid, 1/3 of them were babies. And there is footage and recordings of this. So the students listened to that. And I know it's hard, but I also want them to understand that why some people are so connected to the idea of cults being these sort of dangerous, murderous things. And some cults are, but they are, not all cults are. In fact, the definition of cult changes over time. The understanding of what a cult was in the 17th century was the veneration of a person or ideology, initially a religious person or ideology. And then thereafter, about a century later, the religious aspect was eliminated. The definition of what we think about in terms of cults as being these very dangerous cults where people end up unalived is because of things like Jonestown, is because of Waco, is because of Heaven's Gate. But that has changed because of digital technology in terms of how we think about what cults are. Because there are a lot of things that we think of as cults that don't have quite that overwhelming aspect to our lives. I introduced the concept of the cult plus marketing continuum, which is the basis for the whole book and a framework that I created to help people understand the crossover between marketing and cults. It starts with brand cults, goes to influencers who I call cult light, then influencers as conspiracy theorists, and finally to multi-level marketing. I call MLMs the canary in the coal mine because they have been around longer than any of these other things that we look at, and they most reflect what a cult is, what we standardly think of as a cult. Now, as you continue across, you have more anxiety in the system, you have more extremism in the system. I'm also not suggesting that you move from one thing to the next, but rather that you have this increasing extremism and anxiety brought about because of digital technology, at least in part. And that is why I say that we don't live in an attention economy. We live today in an anxiety economy. Because the more anxious we are, the more upset we are, the more we look for ways to relieve that anxiety. And we end up in this anxiety, doom-scrolling, anxiety purchase cycle, which is exactly what they want to have happen. Next time we will start digging into what exactly is a cult and how do we think about cults today. What are their specific recruitment and retention tactics? We begin to show how marketers use the same kind of tactics. I am also creating a cult resource list if you want to read additional books or look at other documentaries beyond what we will be covering in the class. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in. I'm not sure what my office hours are going to be this semester, but I'll let you know as soon as I do. Welcome all.